It was a typical Friday afternoon when three teenage friends, Jack, Claire, and Tom, decided to spend their weekend playing RPGs at Jack's house. They had prepared for this weekend for weeks, stocking up on snacks, drinks, and board games. As the sun began to set on the first night, they had settled into their RPG campaign, fully immersed in their imaginary world. As the night wore on, they became more and more engrossed in their game, losing track of time. It was only when Jack checked the clock that they realized it was already 3 in the morning. They decided to call it a night and head to bed. But when they tried to leave the house, they discovered that all the doors and windows were sealed shut. The three friends tried to break down the doors, but they were shocked to find that cement had been used to seal them shut. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. They searched for other ways to escape, but every window, door, and vent was completely sealed. As they began to run out of air, they knew they had to find a way out quickly. Jack, Claire, and Tom continued to search for a way out of the sealed house, growing increasingly desperate with each passing minute. They tried everything they could think of to break through the cement and escape, but nothing worked. Claire suggested they try to call for help, but when they checked their phones, they found they had no signal. They began to feel as if they were trapped in a nightmare with no way out. As time went on, they started to run out of air and their panic grew more intense. Tom then had an idea. He suggested they try to find any weak points in the cement and chip away at them with a hammer. They searched for tools and found a small hammer in the basement. They began to chip away at the cement, and to their surprise, it started to give way. Their hope was short-lived, however, as they soon realized that the cement had been reinforced with steel bars. They continued to try to chip away at it with a hammer, but their efforts were futile. As they grew more and more desperate, they began to bicker and argue with one another, blaming each other for their predicament. Tensions rose and tempers flared, but they eventually realized that they needed to work together if they were going to escape. It was then that they discovered the hidden room in Jack's basement. They were shocked by what they found, a strange collection of artifacts and objects that seemed to have no earthly explanation. Then, they saw Jack standing there, a dark aura surrounding him, as he explained that he was a collector demon. Tom and Claire were horrified by the revelation, but Jack was unrepentant, telling them that he needed their moments of playing RPG to add to his collection. They tried to reason with him, begging him to release them, but he refused, revealing that he had made a deal with a greater demon to become a collector. Claire and Tom began to realize that Jack was beyond saving, that he had become a pawn of the demonic forces. They knew they had to find a way to escape, but Jack was too powerful, and they were too weak. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Tom found a hidden door in the basement that led to a tunnel. They crawled through the tunnel, emerging outside the house. As they ran down the street, they realized that the air outside was sweet and fresh, and they breathed it in deeply. As they looked back at the house, they saw Jack standing in the doorway, his eyes glowing red with anger. But just as they thought they had escaped, a strange feeling came over them. They looked at each other, realizing that they had been transported back to the beginning of their weekend of RPG games. They were confused and disoriented, wondering how they had ended up back at the start. But then they saw Jack, smiling wickedly, as he revealed that they were still trapped in his demonic realm, doomed to relive the same weekend over and over again, until he had collected every last moment of their lives.